The door clicked shut behind her with a finality that didn't need words. 62-year-old Lena Matthews stood still for a moment, the weight of her suitcase dragging one arm, the weight of her son's decision dragging the rest of her. The porch light cast a soft yellow glow over the stoop, illuminating the chipped wood beneath her feet, the faint scuff marks she'd scrubbed away for years. Now, it didn't matter. She didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, because it hurt more than anything, but because tears felt like giving in. She had been through worse, survived worse. She'd carried her dignity through cotton fields, through polished kitchens that weren't hers, through whispered slurs dressed up as compliments. Her voice was calm, but it cracked, just slightly, as she said, "I made sure you had one, son." From inside, Marcus didn't respond. The lock turned. The silence that followed wasn't new. It was the same silence that had greeted her at dinner tables, when white employers ignored her presence. The same silence that followed her in grocery store aisles when people clutched their bags tighter. It was the silence of being rendered invisible while carrying everyone else's burdens. She turned slowly, wheeling the old Navy suitcase behind her. It bumped down the stairs, thump, thump like a reluctant child. Her shoes met the wet pavement. With a sigh, the sky, gray and heavy, let down a thin, persistent rain. As she walked, her thoughts flickered between past and present. She remembered the way she used to press Marcus's shirts for job interviews, slipping $5 bills into his wallet without him noticing. She remembered the time he came home crying from school after being called a slur, and how she'd held him until he fell asleep. She never let him see her cry then either. "You made your choice, Mama." That's what he had said, as if she had chosen anything other than survival. As if the sacrifices she made to keep him from feeling the sting of the world's ugliness somehow invalidated her voice now. She had protected him from truths he wasn't ready to hear about how the world saw black women like her. How many doors had been slammed in her face long before he was born. She reached the corner and stopped under a flickering streetlight. Across the street, a pair of teens laughed under a storefront awning. Their joy reminded her of the dreams she once had before. Life trimmed them into something more tolerable, more acceptable. She took one breath, then another. A car passed, sending up a spray of water that clung to her skirt. She didn't flinch. Dignity, even now, was hers to hold. In the distance, neon motel signage blinked dimly, red and tired. She adjusted her coat and kept walking toward it. Tomorrow would begin in a room not her own, but for the first time in years, she wasn't carrying anyone else's weight but her own. The key clicked with a jolt as Lena turned the rusted knob. Room 208 groaned open to reveal a faded brown carpet, 2 mismatched chairs, and a bed that sank in the middle like it had given up long ago. The motel smelled of bleach and rust, clean enough to be decent, but heavy with stories no one wanted to remember. She stepped inside, dragging her suitcase across the floor. The silence greeted her like an old enemy. She placed the case near the bed and sat down carefully, as if afraid the mattress might reject her too. The air was thin, the light flickering, the rain still tapped at the window, softer now, but steady like a metronome ticking back through time. She saw herself at 16 again, sitting in the principal's office of Oak Ridge High, Georgia, 1977. A guidance counselor, a white woman with a tight smile and tighter eyes, told her the scholarship she'd applied for had gone to someone more suitable. The words had landed like bricks. "You're bright, Lena, almost smart, but maybe not college smart. Almost smart." Lonked. Lena blinked, dragging herself back to the present. She stood, walked over to the mirror hanging crooked. Above the desk, her reflection was thin and tired, face-lined with decades of labor, but beneath that, something stronger still pulsed. She didn't speak. The silence in the room was too sacred now, but memory kept playing 20-2 years old. Walking into the town's only bank in her Sunday best, portfolio in hand, asking for a business loan, the banker never looked up when he denied her, just circled risk concern on a form and slid it back without a word. Back then she'd gone home and cried for 3 minutes. Then she ironed a uniform and went back to work cleaning houses, picking up pennies, saving dimes. Every dollar was folded carefully into a jar, then a second one, then an envelope beneath the floorboards. No trust, not even in systems. Only herself. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. He hadn't heard from her, not even a voicemail. Dina leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You keep looking at that phone like she's gonna apologize. Marcus frowned. She never trusted me with money, ever. She always kept her own stash. Wouldn't even let me help with the bills. Dina's voice was soft, but firm. She didn't trust anyone, Marcus. You think that came from nowhere? He looked away, jaw tightening. She always made me feel like I wasn't enough. She made sure you had a future, Dina said gently, even if it cost her hers. Marcus didn't answer. Silence wrapped around him like guilt. Back in room 208, Lena lay down without. Pulling back the covers, she stared at the ceiling as her mind wandered to all the sacrifices never spoken of. The scholarships she funded anonymously. The groceries she delivered in secret. The forgiveness she gave without ever being asked. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound now, and tomorrow she would visit the storage unit. She needed to see if it was all still there. The next morning, Lena stood outside the gated, a lot of safekeep storage, her breath visible in the cool dawn air. Her coat collar was turned up, scarf knotted tight. The place hadn't changed, still tucked between a shuttered dry cleaner and a chain-link fence overtaken by ivy. It was quiet, almost reverent. She stepped inside the office, a bell jingling. Overhead, behind the desk, sat a woman with salt and pepper lokes and gold hoops. Her name tag read Joanne. Joanne looked up, then broke into a warm smile. Well, I'll be damned. Miss Lena Matthews. Lena smiled faintly, still holding on to Unit 41. Sealed and untouched, just like you left it. They walked together. Down the narrow corridor, shoes tapping against concrete. The fluorescent lights flickered above like sleepy eyelids. Joanne keyed in a code and pulled open the door. The unit was cold and dark, but Lena didn't flinch. She moved with practiced grace toward a plastic bin labeled linens. Underneath the decoy was a battered lockbox, wrapped in a faded church bulletin. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. You want some privacy? Joanne asked gently. Lena shook her head. I need to say it out loud to someone. Joanne leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Lena knelt on the ground and opened the box. Inside, a thick envelope of deposit slips, dusty passbooks, and a small cloth-bound notebook wrapped in a silk scarf. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. I started saving in '84, Lena said quietly. Cleaning houses for families who talked like I wasn't in the room. They didn't know I listened when they talked about real estate stocks, money. She handed Joanne a yellowed slip. Bought my first property with a tax return and 20 borrowed dollars. Joanne flipped through the notebook handwritten entries. Careful calculations, newspaper clippings tucked between pages. This ain't luck, she murmured. This is strategy. No one ever saw me as someone who could do more than dust baseboards and make potato salad, Lena said. But numbers, they don't lie. They don't care if you're black or poor or tired. Joanne exhaled. You're the richest woman I know and no one ever saw you. Lena's eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away. That's fine. I saw me. Behind them, a beam of light streamed in from the cracked ceiling panel. Dust motes danced like fireflies, swirling above the notebook. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus sat in a cramped office cubicle, rubbing his temples. His bank app blinked red. Again, he'd maxed the credit card last week. His supervisor had just warned of more layoffs. He thought of Lena, of the door, of her silence. He stared at the screen. Jaw clenched. Back at the unit, Lena stood, gathering the papers. She placed the notebook back in the box with care, like something sacred. I've got plans, she said softly, more to herself than to Joanne, and none of them involve going backward. She closed the lid. The lock clicked shut. Marcus sat in the HR office like a man half awake. The walls were too white, the clock too loud. The director's voice was a practiced mixture of regret and neutrality. Due to restructuring, your position is being eliminated. We appreciate your service. He barely registered the rest severance. Career transition assistance. Contact HR. It didn't matter. His badge was already on the desk. As he walked to his car, he didn't feel angry. He felt hollow. That evening, Dina greeted him with cautious silence. He didn't say much. Just sat at the kitchen table, staring at a bottle of unopened wine. It had been meant for a celebration they never got around to. We could ask my parents, Dina offered hesitantly, just to help us get through the next month. Marcus scoffed but nodded. They needed help. The next day, they sat across. From Dina's father, William, in his glassy home office, mahogany shelves, leather chairs, a grandfather clock that ticked too loud. I appreciate you seeing us, Marcus began, choosing his words carefully. We're going through a tough time. I just need a little help. Alone. Just until I get back on my feet. William steepled his fingers. You've always seemed proud. I just want a hand, not a leash. William raised an eyebrow. You people always confuse the two. The words struck with more precision than volume. Marcus stiffened, then glanced at Dina. She looked away. You people, he echoed. Voice low, William offered a faint smile. Don't misunderstand me. I'm just saying sometimes pride gets in the way of planning, of discipline. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept still. He wasn't new to this coded condescension wrapped in civility, but it cut deeper now. Maybe because, for the first time, he was starting to understand how his mother must have felt walking into rooms like this century after century. Later that night, Marcus sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. On the shelf beside him sat a framed photo of his wedding day. His mother stood just behind him, hand on his shoulder, smile small but proud. She wore a cream suit and her hands were clasped in front of her, holding something invisible, something like pain or maybe restraint. He thought back to junior year, the night he and two friends were caught with stolen electronics. The police had called Lena, not him. She arrived, eyes tired, voice calm. Charges never stuck. He never knew why. Now he did. Must have used her savings. The same money she'd hidden from everyone. Hidden, he realized. Not out of spite, but out of fear. Fear of not being believed. Fear of being judged for wanting. Control over her own labor. Her own legacy. He leaned forward, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, shame didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a mirror. Upstairs, Dina turned off the light. Marcus stayed in the dark. Tomorrow, he'd start looking. Not for a new job, but for Lena. The morning after, Marcus sat in darkness. Lena stood in light. She stepped into the modest office of the Unity Youth Center. Just off West 9th, handing over a sealed envelope to the young receptionist behind the counter. She didn't give a name, just nodded and walked out, coat drawn tight, purse tucked close. The center director would open it an hour later and sit in stunned silence, $25,000 in crisp cashier's checks, and a note that read simply, for the ones still rising, it was the first of many. Lena moved like a whisper through her Citibank lobbies. P.O. boxes, donation portals, no interviews, no recognition. She channeled decades of being unseen into a purpose that didn't require visibility. Anonymous scholarships, bail funds, grocery deliveries. Every act a salve, 2 wounds she recognized from across generations. She found Tasha on a Tuesday. The girl sat alone in a folding chair at the center. Hoodie up, fists clenched, 16. Suspended again for disruptive behavior after defending herself in class. Lena watched from a distance at first, then sat beside her when no one else did. They think I'm angry, Tasha muttered, eyes fixed on the scuffed floor. But I'm just tired. Lena nodded slowly. That's what they call us when we stop shrinking. They didn't talk about school after that, not right away. Lena asked about books, music, what Tasha wanted to become. A civil rights lawyer, she said after a while. The kind who doesn't sit down when it gets messy? Lena smiled. That's the best kind. The weeks passed quietly. Lena's guidance came in small ways. A paperback slipped into Tasha's backpack, advice written on napkins at lunch, and always quiet support. It was healing by design, not by accident. Elsewhere in the city, envelopes slid through mail slots. and under doors. Now, in a worn-down kitchen, a single mother opened one and collapsed to her knees, scholarship letter in hand. Her daughter had a future now. Lena watched it unfold like dominoes, lives nudged, not claimed. No attention, just motion. She didn't want anyone to know where the money came from. That wasn't the point. She'd never felt richer at night, Lena. Sat by the window of her motel room, listening to the murmur of distant traffic and the occasional hum of laughter from the street below. In her lap, a leather-bound notebook, new pages, new names. A revolution didn't need noise, only intention. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly time. Tomorrow the youth center would unveil its new donor wall. She would go not as a guest, not as a name etched in brass. Just to watch someone else, however, would be there too. Marcus didn't expect to find anything that night. He showed up at the Unity Youth Center fundraiser because Dina insisted. It's important to support the community, she said. Though her eyes said more, it might help you feel closer to her. He stood near the back of the room, nursing a lukewarm cup of punch, not really listening to the speeches. The center smelled like floor polish and fresh paint. Volunteers bustled, teens smiled in groups, music played softly in the background. Then he saw it. A new brass plaque mounted on the east wall, major contributions provided by Lena Matthews. His breath caught. He stepped forward slowly, almost afraid to blink. Her name gleamed under soft gallery lights. Engraved with the same steady hand she used to write his school notes, he stumbled back. Heart-pounding, Marcus spent the next day retracing her trail, the shame thick as smoke in his chest. First, he went to the storage facility. Joanne was in the office, flipping through a ledger. "I'm looking for Lena Matthews," he said, voice brittle. Joanne barely looked up. "What makes you think she wants to be found? I'm her son." I got her attention. Her eyes narrowed, arms crossing. "Oh, you're that son." "I know what I did," Marcus said quietly, "but I didn't know." She carried your weight for 30 years, Joanne snapped. He dropped her like luggage. He flinched. "Please." She studied him for a long time, then stood, walked to a file cabinet, and pulled out a single photo. Lena standing outside Unit 41, hands on her hips, smiling like she'd finally won something. "She came by to protect what no one else ever valued," Joanne said. "Didn't need recognition. It's just the right to keep what she earned." Marcus left without the photo, but with a direction. Later, he stood outside the youth center again. It was late afternoon. The sky was starting to turn gold, casting a warm light. Across the mural-covered walls, he stepped inside. The air felt different this time, charged, reverent. He wandered past the library nook, through the art studio, finally into the main hallway. There, on the donor wall, beside a bright mural of community heroes, hung a framed photo of Lena. She wasn't posing, just laughing, mouth open, eyes closed, joy spilling freely. Beneath the frame read, "In honor of Lena Matthews, quiet builder, fierce light." Marcus touched the glass gently, his fingers trembling. All his life, he'd seen her as a caretaker, a provider, but never as a force, never as a strategist, never as someone who, while being denied opportunity after opportunity, still created one for everyone else. He sat on the bench nearby, head bowed. She'd done all of this without applause. He didn't know how to find her, but he would try. Not to beg, not to fix, just to see her, truly see her. As the sun dipped lower, he stepped outside. The center glowed behind him. It was filled with laughter and voices that carried hope. He pulled out his phone. This time, he wouldn't wait for her to call. He would begin where she left off. Tomorrow, there was a march downtown, Unity Walk. He had a feeling she might be there. The streets pulsed with feet and voices. Drums echoed down the boulevard, steady like a heartbeat. Signs waved in the July heat. Justice is love in action. Black futures matter. We are still here. Lena walked near the front of the march, a wide-brimmed hat shading her face, her steps even, deliberate. She didn't need a megaphone. When she finally reached the plaza stage, the crowd quieted. The organizer handed her the mic, but Lena held it low at first. Eyes sweeping the people gathered, young and old, fists raised, hope worn proudly. She stepped forward, voice rising. Above the wind, I used to think surviving was enough, she began. But silence doesn't protect us, just keeps us invisible. We deserve more than endurance. We deserve power, voice, and presence. Her words landed like rain on dry ground. Cheers broke out. From the edge of the square, Marcus watched, his throat tightening. He had come early, uncertain if he'd actually find her. Now she stood less than 30 yards away, but felt further than ever. He didn't approach during the applause. He waited until the crowd began to drift toward the food trucks and musical acts. Lena stepped off the stage and walked toward a bench shaded by a sycamore tree. That's where he found her. She looked up, surprised. I figured you'd come. He sat beside her, but not too close. For a while neither spoke. Then Marcus whispered, I see you now, Mama. Lena turned to him. Her expression held no anger, just history. I forgive you, she said quietly. But I won't shrink to make you feel better. He nodded, tears slipping down without drama. I wouldn't ask you to. She looked back toward the plaza where children danced near a drumline. I spent so much time building silence into strength. But it's voice that changes things. Marcus inhaled slowly. Can we talk again? Not about money, about ... US? Lena smiled softly. We can start, no promises, no embrace, just a beginning. She stood and adjusted her hat. A gust of wind lifted her scarf. Above them, a banner flapped high on the municipal building. We are still here. Lena stepped forward into the crowd, not away from Marcus, but toward the life she'd reclaimed. He didn't follow right away. He let her lead.